Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Dunera in Conversation. I am Lisa Goldberg, and I have with me today, I'm going to say my friend from social media, because I feel like we're friends from social media, Lyndi Cohen, also known as the Nude Nutritionist, who I will talk about at length in a minute. But first I want to say, just on Dunera, these times are tough. Even in Sydney, we're finding it tough, and everybody's taking a step back, I think, to more social distancing and more staying home. So I think that we all need to remember that on the internet, there are so many amazing resources that can occupy us, educate us, thrill us, interest us, whatever we want. And Dunera is providing a really good hub for all of that. And as you know, I'm part of the food team with Melissa, and we have some amazing events coming up. Next Monday, we're doing a winner chicken dinner, where it's a Monday morning cooking club event where we're going to cook a delicious chicken dish that is a cross between a chicken schnitzel and garlic bread, and it is not fried, and it is totally amazing. And then we've got Lyndi Cohen the week after, a gorgeous, young, amazing cook from Sydney who's coming to cook with us. And the week after, we have got Alice Zaslavsky, MasterChef alumni and promoter of veggies now, and ABC recipe person, and she's going to come and talk to us too. So we've got fabulous things coming up, so please have a look and register for all of those. So I'm very happy to have with me the really fabulous and bright and inspiring TV dietitian who, and I quote, calls out wellness wankery. And here's a little bit about her, and I'm going to just show you a short 1-minute video, if I can just get this share screen going, just to give you a little intro into Lyndi Cohen.
You might see me as a nutritionist on TV and think, yeah, though I bet she's never struggled with food. The truth is, I used to struggle with my weight and overeating and intense cravings for years. But when I stopped listening to all the diet noise and just got back to basics, everything changed. I even wrote a book called The Nude Nutritionist, sharing what I've learned. Throughout my career, I've helped thousands of people and seen so many fad diets come and go. Now, I want to use my years of experience as a dietitian and recipe developer to help save you time in the kitchen, break free from all or nothing thinking, and be more consistent with exercise. No more getting bored eating the same food over and over again, or having to start from scratch every Monday. Whether you're busy, tired, or short on time, Back to Basics will help make things easier for you. And if you don't love the program, I have a 30-day money-back guarantee, no questions asked. It's time to stop falling off the bandwagon and just get back to basics.
Thanks, I love that. That's a gorgeous video. I'm sold. Anyway, so proper introduction now about Lyndi, so you know a little bit more about her before we start. So Lyndi's a regular on Channel 9's Today Show, and she's the founder of Keep It Real program and the Back to Basics app, which she was talking about then, and best-selling author of the Nude Nutritionist book. And she promotes what I love, which is what I love, a stripped bare back to basics approach to her 110,000 plus Instagram followers, helping them feel good in their bodies. Wait for this, no guilt, no calorie counting, and no deprivation. So those of you who know me well know that, you know, I have struggled with food and diet and eating over the years. And for me, the worst thing is a fad diet and cutting out food groups and counting calories. They don't work. It just doesn't work. And so for me, in the sort of oversubscribed world of health and diet, Lyndi, the Nude Nutritionist, really stood out from the pack for me. She really caught my attention. And we've chatted from time to time on social media. We met at a wedding once. And so I feel like I do know her a little bit through social media, which is a funny thing these days. And I love that she's always sharing great social media messages, showing the real versus the fake, which is just fantastic in herself, and encouraging us all to feel good about ourselves, which is so important. So I would like to welcome to the Dunera project, Lyndi Cohen, and I'm hoping quietly, with fingers crossed, that in the future she might come join us and do some more sessions and maybe some cooking demos, but we'll talk about that another time. So good morning, good morning, good morning, Lyndi. So happy to have you here.
Good morning, Lisa, and thank you so much for having me. Hello to everyone. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and have this really important chat with us. I think we're going to get through some really good topics.
Yeah, I think so. Like, honestly, I could spend 3 hours with you. I have a list of things so long that I want to talk to you about. So I'd love to start with you at your beginning, because we see what we see online, on TV, on social media. Can you just talk about where you come from and your background and your growing up, I think, particularly around food? Talk us through that.
And I think you saw a little bit in the video, but it really just touched the surface, because I think we often look at someone who's a nutritionist and you think, well, they've got it sorted and it comes easily for them. But for me, I grew up feeling like already by the age of 10, I felt like I was bigger than the other girls. I got a calorie counter book and I learned the calories for every single food. And at this very early age started this very obsessive relationship with food, where the goal was to always weigh less. And throughout my childhood, really, I became more and more obsessed with trying to weigh less. And the very interesting thing is the more I tried to control what I ate, the more I created long lists of forbidden foods, the harder it felt to not eat these foods. And soon enough, I developed something called binge eating disorder, which is now recognized as an eating disorder. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically when you know what you should be eating, but especially when no one else is around, you might go into the pantry and you start eating, so-called bad foods, and you find it really hard to stop. And you can keep eating and eating a huge amount of food. And what the problem is with binge eating is there's a lot of shame involved, because on the one hand, you know what you should be doing, but you're doing the complete opposite. And so what happened for me is this just snowballed and it became this big problem where I ended up becoming categorically morbidly obese. For someone who was so dedicated to losing weight, the whole process of dieting had actually made me gain weight. It had made me deeply miserable in my body. And so this went on for a decade. It took me a decade of this obsessive thinking to go, this can't be it. This doesn't make sense. I'm doing everything right by the book. As they say, there's nothing wrong with me. Because I think what we often do is we blame our own willpower. We go, everyone else around me has just got good self-control, but I am weak, or there is something wrong with me. And if I just try harder, if I just try this new approach, if I just do a whole range of things, then it's going to work. And I tell you what, we can all stick to a diet for a short period of time. Diets are easy. Diets tell us eat this at this time. There are rules. It is black and white. We can all do that and we all lose weight. And then once we get sick of being on the diet, we blame ourselves. We think we failed, instead of blaming the very fact that the diet is the thing that messed us up. Now, to add to that further, the next thing that makes it hard is we don't even recognize what a diet is anymore. Because, let's say in the 80s and the 90s, we really thought a diet was maybe the Atkins diet, the cabbage soup diet, a calorie counting diet, right? Which we've all done, the light and easy, the Weight Watchers, I can relate.
Yeah. You forgot the Israeli army diet, sorry. The Israeli army diet?
Oh yes, that was big.
Diet?
Terrible. I hated that one.
Diet? Okay, go on. Sorry.
There was a diet I did where I just ate milk and banana for one day. It was terrible. Anyway. Yep. What I'm saying is we actually don't recognize diets anymore because we assume they're going to be a book or a program. But most of us, if you have spent enough years dieting, there are going to be rules in your head, that a script that you tell yourself, and these diet rules are as good as being on a diet. So you might go, I know diets don't work, but I would have a chat to you right now and go, well, actually, you are still on a diet, because in your mind, there is a good way, there's a bad way to eat. And once we start to unravel all these rules, we start to get a lot more freedom around food, and we stop trying to eat from our head and we listen to our body. I think some of the rules that we often forget about are things like, probably you were brought up thinking that you have to have breakfast. It's the most important meal of the day. That's something that parents love to teach kids. Or you have to finish everything on your plate. These two things alone, these are diet rules. They're teaching you how to ignore your hunger and to listen to a set of rules that are telling you that there is a right way and a wrong way to eat. So what I really encourage from all my years of dieting is for us to let go of all these rules that are making eating hard in our head, so that we can get back to listening to our appetite So we can eat intuitively and relaxed, and food can just become food again. It doesn't become this thing, this weight in our lives where we're constantly worrying about how much we weigh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will go back to my story quickly and just say that, you know, I got to this point where I was morbidly obese. I was diagnosed with anxiety and really was
How old were
very...
you then? How old were you then?
I was 21, so I was super young. But what you have to remember is I had just graduated as a dietitian. And I had already, by this point, been sent to 4 different dietitians who gave me very strict rules and meal plans and things that I needed to eat. So I really knew what I should be doing. And yet I was the heaviest weight I'd ever been. And then I thought to myself, there is no way I'm going to be a dietitian who practices like these people who I was sent to. That seems unethical. And I developed an eating disorder. So many of my friends had an eating disorder or a very disordered relationship with food. And so I thought, all right, I need to do something about this. So I decided to learn about what I'm talking about now, which is intuitive eating, to develop this philosophy. I ended up losing 20 kilograms, but what's really important to know about that is I lost that weight over 4 years. If I had pursued weight loss, if I had said, all right, I have to weigh less, I would have hopped on a scale every week. I probably would have hopped on the scale every day. And I would have seen that I wasn't losing enough weight, because when we try and lose weight, we expect that we lose weight consistently, that we never regain weight. We think it's just a linear process down, and we expect quite a bit of weight loss each week. But if we're getting sustainable weight loss, what we really need to work on is changing our brain, because your brain is the most important organ when it comes to your body. And so once we create that healthy relationship with food, you don't need to force yourself to not have extra dessert because you don't feel like it. And I remember the first time that I actually got halfway through a meal and I thought, oh, I'm quite full. And I pushed away the plate. And for someone who's never struggled with their weight, that's just an everyday occurrence. But when you have been dieting, the idea of leaving food on your plate is wild. And so that was a huge moment for me.
Was there something at that time that was like the light globe or like light bulb going off that actually, can you remember the point?
I was clothes shopping and I walked into this clothing shop, and I'm a 21-year-old girl and I'm wearing size 16 and I can't fit into normal clothes in any shop. And I'm, you know, forcing myself to exercise for hours each day and binge eating when no one's looking and hiding wrappers. And it got to the point that I thought, I can't go on like this. This isn't normal. This isn't right. I think that I got to quite an extreme point, but I think most people don't really get to that extreme. And so we become content and okay with the obsession, with the idea that, you know, we be good all week. We get to the weekend, we overeat, and every single Monday we feel like we have to start again from scratch. And this isn't normal. This shouldn't be the way that we need to spend our lives. And you think, well, I've spent 20, 30, 40, 50 years of my life dieting, and look where I am now. If dieting worked, wouldn't we have reached a point by now where we go, oh, I don't even have to think about that anymore? And yet you think about how much time we waste thinking about food, how much guilt, how many holidays I have ruined because I felt so angry with myself for eating, and I felt angry with myself for how I looked in a swimsuit that I couldn't just relax. I kept thinking, well, as soon as I get home, I have to eat so much healthier to lose this weight. I avoided photos with friends and I missed out on opportunities because all these things that I thought were okay were happening. So, yeah.
How much do you think that, how you feel about your own body impacts all of this? I remember, I've also done the whole dietitian diet route forever since I went to Weight Watchers with my sister. My sister's actually watching now and she'll laugh because we used to go to Weight Watchers. I must have been 14 and was probably like 3 kilos overweight, you know, shouldn't have even cared about it.
Absolutely.
And, you know, you weigh in, and then on the way home from Weight Watchers, we used to go to the fish and chip shop and eat fish and chips on the way home because we'd weighed in and we thought that was fine, right? Like, what is that about? Seriously? So that's how I grew up with that sort of thing. And then I remember as an adult going to a dietitian where there was a cartoon on the wall which showed an elephant on some scales. And I just thought, what's that about? What's that telling all these people in the waiting room? Like, I just thought, God, that's shocking. So can you talk about that concept? I know you talk about body positive and body neutral, but let's talk about that, how we feel about ourselves.
Well, I think, well, firstly, I don't think you have to be overweight or obese to hate your body. I think, you know, you often get people who are in slim bodies who hate how they look, and it means that they do very unhealthy things. If you think about it, we live in a culture where the normal size of a person you see on TV is, you know, a size 6 or a size 8, which is the smallest size clothing that you can get. And, you know, even I go on TV and I'm, you know, won't fit into the wardrobe that they have for all the other people, and I'm just a normal weighted human. And so we have this perception that we need to weigh less to be happier. We have this distorted perception that to be healthy, we have to be slimmer. Because every time you open up a health magazine, what do you see? You see these very young, I don't know, they're very young, like we have this idea that you have to be young to be healthy. Do you notice that correlation? It's ridiculous. And you have to be beautiful, and you have to be young, and you might have blonde hair and look a bit like, you know, the slimmer version of me. And it's absolutely outrageous that we have this one idea of health. The other thing that messes with our idea of body image is the BMI. And we've all been told, you know, go into your doctor's appointment, and on paper, if you look at your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your blood sugars, you're healthy and you eat a healthy diet and you exercise, but you go to the doctor and the doctor says, you know, on the BMI scale, you look like you need to lose a bit of weight. When they do that, they're not looking at your health. They are looking at your weight and your height, and they're trying to correlate those two meaningless numbers. The BMI was developed by scientists, one or two mathematicians really, to work out on a population-wide scale, could they look where people's weight was? It actually does not correlate with health at all. And what we need to move away from is this idea that you need to weigh less in order to be healthy. Because when we start doing healthy habits that feel good, your weight is naturally going to find its own happy, sweet spot. And it might not be the weight you think it's meant to be. We have this idea, you know, that if I just weighed 5 kilograms less, if I just weighed 10 kilograms less, then I'd be happy. But maybe there's a reason why you haven't lost that weight. If you've been trying all these years to weigh that magical number, and we all have a magical number, don't we? That we wish we weighed. You got to think to yourself, maybe you're not meant to weigh that. Maybe that magical number, maybe even if you weighed at your wedding or you weighed it, you know, 10 years ago, your weight is allowed to shift and change, especially as you get older. It's better to have more weight, to be more protective for yourself. And we get stuck on this magical weight. And I want you to know that maybe that this weight you are at, this is where your hormones are balanced. It's where you have energy. It's where you fall asleep easily. It's where you have the bandwidth in your brain to think about things other than food. And maybe the compromise that you would need to make to get to that extra 5 kilogram weight loss isn't worth it at all. I'm not saying we don't make healthy habits and healthy changes. I'm all about that, actually. What I'm saying is that we don't do them for the purpose of simply losing weight, because what happens when we do that? We'll try this habit, we'll lose the weight, and as soon as we've lost the weight, it's like we've reached this goal. And all these habits that we've adopted, well, they start to fall off and they don't happen anymore because we were doing them for the wrong reasons. So what I often teach is about this idea that we need to be doing things for enjoyment. For example, exercise. If exercise is not enjoyable, you are doing it wrong. That is not the way it should be. Exercise should always feel good in your body. And so if that means that we're doing gentle, soft exercises, going for a nice, easy walk, you know, maybe taking a grandkid or a child out for a walk in a pram, or we're going to do some stretching, something really that feels good for our body. This is perfect because this easy, enjoyable exercise is sustainable. It's consistent. And when you do something consistently, that's much more effective than trying to do something because you think you should be doing it, but not lasting longer than a couple of weeks or a few months. So what we need to get away from is this idea of all these shoulds. I should be doing this. I shouldn't be eating this. And try getting to go, well, what do I feel like doing? Because I tell you what, the human body, it enjoys exercise. You have more energy when you exercise. You sleep better. Your mood is lifted. And so if we stop getting into our brain about it, you just listen to your body, you might find that you can enjoy exercise. And the same applies for food. When we eat a lot, when we drink a lot, we don't feel good. So there's no need to berate yourself, to make yourself feel guilty, because as soon as you tune into your body, you go, I actually feel better when I don't finish this entire thing, or when I eat more vegetables in my diet. So we have to get out of this rule-based mentality and start tuning into your body. Because I don't know if you know this, but you have your natural inbuilt weight management system. Before diets came along, people managed their weight very well. In fact, only since diets were invented has people's weights been going up. There's a very beautiful, if you look at two charts next to each other, you can see a really nice correlation between dieting and weight gain. So this weight management system, this is actually called your appetite. So your appetite, its sole purpose is to help you get the right amount of energy to fuel your body. And when you feel full, your body's like, we have enough energy for now. So when we simply tune into that, instead of, I have to have breakfast, I have to finish everything on my plate, or I'm not allowed to have such a big snack now because it's too much food. When we get out of that thinking, when we just feed our body the amount of energy it needs, we are actually able to give our body within 50 calories accuracy of how much energy it needs for that day. And I tell you what, some days you burn way more calories. Some days you burn far less, depending on whether or not you're sleeping well, or you're exercising, or you're stuck at home in quarantine. And if we just get in tune with our hunger, we are going to be able to feed our body to find its healthiest weight. And that, as I said, not going to be the weight we wish it would be, but it's going to be a healthy weight, and it will happen gradually, and it will happen without you trying.
What about in these times, particularly people eating through anxiety, through stress, through being, locked in their houses? I remember at the beginning of our ISO in Sydney, the first 2 weeks, we were all so stressed, and we were eating chips and twisties and all the things that we don't normally have in the house, because it was giving us something, I don't know what, that we sort of felt we needed. And then at the end of 2 weeks, sort of we went back to how we usually ate. Like, what's your thoughts on that? How to stop that?
Well, I think especially when you've spent your entire life being told that you can't eat these foods, when you have them, you do get a different hormonal release that really reinforces that behavior so much more. I think we all have one friend, the kind of person who eats very slowly, they're naturally slim, they're not interested in junk food, they're just a naturally healthy eater. And I bet you could ask that person, have you ever struggled with your weight? Have you ever dieted? And they're going to say, no, it's never been a thing for me. So when we have a history of dieting, this is when food has much more of an emotional connection for us, because we know when we're on a diet, we're not allowed to have it. And so when we do, it feels like a treat. It feels special. We know it's for a short period of time, because very soon we're going to have to crack that whip and we're not going to be allowed to have it anymore. What is huge is once you truly realize that anytime you can have chocolate or anytime you can eat chips, you are allowed, it stops being interesting. It does lose its appeal. And then from that place, you have a lot more freedom and choice. But as long as it's in the back of your mind, sugar's really bad for me, I shouldn't be having too much sugar. As soon as you're eating it, you're either going, I shouldn't be eating it while you're eating it. Then afterward, you beat yourself up for eating it. And then you promise to do better again tomorrow, which makes you feel deprived. And we get ourselves stuck in this really awkward cycle. But fundamentally, once we actually allow ourselves to eat it, we realize we don't want to eat and eat and eat. I will also say that, that's one thing that happens. The other thing is your environment. So if we have a house that is filled with more ice cream and chocolate and all those things that we are going to eat, you will eat them more, because as a human, if I open the fridge door, the first things that are in front of my brain, in my eyes, that's probably what I'm going to reach for. And so ideally, one of the first steps we can do is creating that healthier environment. This doesn't mean that you're not allowed to eat chocolate and eat desserts, but it's just not putting it right in front of you so it's the first thing you think of. And knowing that at any time you want to go eat it, you are allowed to, but it doesn't need to be the first thing that we end up seeing. There is one more thing that I think is absolutely important that I think we all do, and that's eating in front of the TV. So Humans are very simple. I don't know if you've heard of the Pavlov's dogs before, but anyone who doesn't know what it is, it's a Russian scientist a few centuries ago. He did a fascinating study where every time he was going to feed his dogs, he'd ring a bell. And sure enough, the dogs learned to associate the ringing of the bell with mealtime, so that every single time the bell rang, they would start salivating. They would get ready to eat. They knew food was coming. Now, I want you to think, if you were Pavlov's dogs, the ringing of the bell is you turning on the TV. When you sit down to watch the TV, you flick it on, suddenly you go, oh, I really feel like eating something. I feel like something sweet. We are ritualistic beings. Even something as simple as sitting in a certain chair or coming home from work at a certain time can make us have this, conditioned feeling. So I think one of the things we need to do is just become really aware of these routines, these habits that we get ourselves stuck into. So if you come home from work, for example, and as soon as you walk through the door, you want to eat everything in sight, two things are happening there. One, you're not eating enough during the day. Fundamentally, I see this problem with people who are dieters. They try to be good all day. They get home in the afternoon and they have a wipeout. And then the next day, the whole cycle repeats. You're nodding your head so you can relate to this. This is the most common thing that happens. What we need to do is get back to eating a more nourishing lunch, a proper lunch. Do you remember how we used to eat proper lunches and now it's salads? There's nothing wrong with having a nice, sustaining sandwich for lunch, and add a tub of yogurt to it as well. And then in the afternoon, before you head home, can you then have another snack as well? Chances are you are hungry. Chances are you're walking through that door way too ravenous. And if you actually give yourself permission to eat a snack, and I'm not talking about a handful of nuts, because we know one handful of nuts becomes 20 handfuls of nuts. It never feels satiating, does it?
Yeah, agree.
What we need to do instead is have something that actually feels properly filling for us. And something like a piece of toast with avocado and maybe a piece of fruit or a yogurt on top of that. Now, if you tell a dieter to eat that, they could go, oh, that's a lot of food to have as just a snack. But I'm telling you, if by eating that extra amount of healthy foods prevents us from coming home and raiding the pantry and eating 20 handfuls of nuts plus everything else, it's fantastic. We're eating healthier, we're not getting to that point of fullness, and we're preventing that afternoon snacking habit.
Yeah.
And so, as I said, we are very conditioned humans, and if we can just become aware of some of these patterns and some of the cues that are triggering them, and also tune into our hunger, then I think we're going to be able to eat so much easier without the stress.
I love on Instagram, for all of you out there who are not, if you're on Instagram, look up Nude Nutritionist and see what Lyndi does. It's a really interesting feed, but I particularly like the posts you do of yourself. So she'll be in a bikini at the beach, and there'll be one picture where she's leaning over and the light's not good and there's a view from a funny angle, and she'll look just like a normal person. And then there's another one where she will look like a supermodel, right? I mean, she's obviously a gorgeous girl, and it just shows you that it's not real. Everybody out there is posting pictures of themselves at their very, very best. And we are all looking at Instagram and aspiring, and our kids are particularly, and grandkids are looking at Instagram, aspiring to be like the fake side of all those people. So I just would love to hear your views. It exists, it's a problem. What do we do about it?
It's a huge problem, because we have this idea that everyone else's life looks better than ours, sounds better than ours, and that we're the ones who struggle. We're the ones who feel deeply sad and have days where we feel hopeless and it just feels like too much. But everyone has really hard days. Everyone has cellulite and rolls in their stomach when they sit down and arms that they wish were slimmer. These things don't actually change, and I think that's quite important. I think one of the things that I think we have this idea of is that you always have to, especially as a woman, it's one of the most aspiring things we are told our entire lives that we can be. If you look at Barbie, for example, she is so deeply unhealthily slim that it's just so ridiculous. And even if you think that, influences you or not, in some way it does. And I think we have to get out of this idea that you must look beautiful from every angle. So I know for myself, if I take a bad photo of myself, it used to ruin my day. I used to go, oh, is that what I look like? Can't believe I look that fat, or that I, look that way from that angle. And I think it's just because we believe that every photo we take must be a good one. You have good angles, you have bad angles, you are going to take bad photos. Sometimes you're going to be walking and you're going to walk past a shop, see your reflection and go, oh, is that what I look like? Because there is an expectation that you must look good from every angle. And that is because we have this distorted view where only people's best sides and best angles are ever shown to us. I think something really interesting is this idea, when you have a photo that you going through old photos and you see a photo of yourself and you go, whoa, how good did I look back then? And then if you cast your mind back, you might think, but I remember really hating how I looked. I remember thinking I wasn't thin enough, I wasn't pretty enough, I didn't look good enough. Why couldn't I appreciate my weight at that weight? And this is exactly the cycle we keep getting ourselves into. That is proof that there is nothing wrong with your body. It's how you see your body. And all the influences that you choose to allow into your brain will influence you.
But our society, sorry, go on.
No, you go on.
No, you go on.
What I was going to say is, if you have kids, if you have grandkids, we have an opportunity now. I believe that for many years, women, we were being taught to eat less, to weigh less, to look a certain way. And what we've been doing is learning very disordered relationships around food. And when we have our kids, we pass on those habits because we're trying to help them, because we're trying to make sure that they don't gain weight. We're worried for them because we know how much we've struggled. So we want to try and help them be the right weight. And what I think we can do, if we really want our kids to be healthy and we want them to have a positive body image, the number one thing you can do is work on your own relationship with food and your body. So you can't expect your daughter or your son, for that matter, to be relaxed around food and to, feel great in their body if it's something that you're still working on. If you can try be a role model, and this is the kind of thing that I teach and I talk about, and there's lots of other books that I could recommend if you want to do extra work on this. It's never too late to try and get that freedom from food, because you can still enjoy, going to a beach and sitting and not caring, and it's liberating. And I've heard the older you get, the less you care, and I'm so excited for that. But that's something I think we can all work on, is just being better role models through the change in ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got two questions for you from that. One is, I think that the people around us don't help either, and the comments people make. And yes, I'm one of those people, and a lot of my friends don't understand it. And I've had so many discussions about it. I hate it if someone who's not my best friend says to me, oh my God, you've lost so much weight. That is my worst thing. And people don't understand it. And I know you've posted on social about it. I'd love to hear what you think.
I think as a culture, we think that's an okay thing to say. We think it's a compliment. If you break that down, that's not actually a compliment. Oh, you've lost weight is simply a comment on how someone's weight is perceived by you. And let me go sidetrack for a sec, that sometimes people lose weight for very unhealthy reasons, through obsessive dieting, through depression, through sickness, through not having access to certain things that they need access to. Commenting on someone's weight like that is hugely triggering for someone who has a history of dieting. And I think if we can try and eliminate that comment from our culture, we'd be doing so much better. Where I think you're also going with this is this idea that often we talk about food amongst friends, and sometimes I think we swap disordered advice between each other. And I don't think we realize that together we're kind of socially making it okay to have these really deeply unhealthy habits amongst ourselves. And I will say that we sometimes get people in our family who think it's their responsibility to help us control what we eat and to control what we look like. And they'll make comments like, should you really be eating that? I think you've had enough. That dress doesn't look good on you. It can be husbands, it can be wives, it can be parents, mums. And these things are deeply hard to deal with. Yes, I mean, can't we all relate in a way? So as long as these comments happen, you will consistently get triggered. You can build up a bit of a fort and go, I'm not going to let this affect me, but it still does. What I did, because I was getting a lot of that in my family and amongst my friends, is I said to those people in my life, I know you think you're helping me by making these comments, but you're actually making it so much harder for me to eat healthily, and you're totally throwing me off. I would really appreciate it if you didn't ever comment on my weight or my food. And you know what? It was a bit of a strange thing for them to try and accept, but it was really important to me. They needed a few reminders because they fell into old habits. They thought they were helping me. So then I had to remind them, I know you think you're helping me, but you're not. When you make these comments, I feel like this, please stop. And within time, that stopped. Now people never comment on my weight. They never comment on whether or not I should eat something. And I think this is a really big part of me actually being able to lose weight. I see a lot of times, and I'm making a generalization here, where we have women who are very conscious of their weight, and we have husbands who try and control their weight through judgment and shame, and they think they're helping. And I think as long as this dynamic exists, it's really tricky to make a lot of progress. So if you can relate to that sentiment, then maybe thinking about, is there a way to address that in your dynamic?
Thank you. That's a really good solution to it. And I'm thinking about all the grandparents out there who have got grandchildren who they think are overweight or eat too much crap or whatever. What should they be doing apart from, you talked about they need to have a healthy relationship with food, but I think they should say nothing. Do you think there's anything they would say to their grandchild that's okay?
It's never okay to comment on a kid's weight, ever. And I imagine if let's say your husband or your partner or a child said to you, you're getting a bit big, you should stop eating that. Imagine how that would affect you. It affects kids in the exact same way, if not worse. So never commenting on weight, even if a kid is very skinny. I think we need to be mindful that we can also, make kids feel very self-conscious about not weighing enough. So never comment on kids' weight. What we can talk to them about is have conversations about how certain foods give us more energy and make us feel good. And then when we eat too much sugar, we actually don't feel so great. And so let's say they come over for afternoon tea. We can have fun conversations around healthy food and talk about how exercise is enjoyable. Never that exercise is something we do to manage our weight so we look good. It's something fun and playful, and you've got to find one that works for you. And this is, I think, why I say we work on our own relationships with food first, because once you have a healthy relationship with food, these conversations come naturally for you. They're easy to talk to your kid about appetite, to explain to them that if they're hungry, they're allowed to eat. And if they're not hungry, they don't need to eat food. And this just reminds me of like a very important concept, this idea we have that we have breakfast, we have lunch, we have dinner, we have snacks in between. And this isn't how you need to eat every single day. Sometimes you need to have more meals, and sometimes you're going to have a day or a week where you're not so hungry. What we need to try and do is, rather than getting stuck into, well, it's 12 p.m., 1 p.m., I always have lunch this time, allowing some fluidity in there. If you do have an extra big snack in the morning, maybe you need a lighter lunch. And when you are intuitive with it, you can let that just roll. Let's say you go away for a weekend and you do eat a lot of food. That's okay, because come Monday, you might not feel like eating as much. You might feel like you really crave home-cooked meals. You crave vegetables. You want to go out for a walk. So when we drop the rules and we drop the judgment of, I have to be good on Monday, you might actually realize that your body is already trying to guide you to make these healthy choices. There's no need to restrict yourself or control it anyway.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a question and this is where I was going anyway. We'd all love to hear your thoughts on a few things. One of them is how we can eat better to help our immunity at this time, and how we can eat better to help our anxiety at this time.
Okay, great topics. Okay, thanks for the question, Mandy. So first things first, a healthy diet isn't going to prevent you from getting COVID. Anyone who tells you that you should be taking probiotics right now, it might reduce your risk of getting coronavirus, has no idea what they're talking about, and I'd be really careful of that kind of recommendation. But boosting our immunity can help us avoid flus and colds that go around, especially in winter time. Eating a food that's good for your immunity can also boost your mood. There's a lot of research to suggest that eating foods that are, you're eating a healthier diet is going to help prevent depression and relieve depressive symptoms, and also help with things like anxiety. So this is going to sound very boring, but I'm going to tell you something that you probably already know, and that is fundamentally, we all need to be eating more vegetables. Now, what we need to be eating to hit the recommendation to boost our immunity and to reduce our anxieties, we need to be having at least 5 serves of vegetables a day. I'm holding up my fist because this fist is 1 serve of vegetables, okay? So if you think you have to get at least 5, and I'm saying minimum of 5, you need to be getting over 5 every single day. If you simply ate more vegetables, you'd be getting in so much more protective things in your body to help with your immunity. Now, let me explain something to you. You have something called an antioxidant. Now, I don't know if you've ever been explained what an antioxidant is. Oxidization in your body causes disease. That's a very simple way of putting it. Antioxidant means it stops the oxidization in your body. Now, what has antioxidants in it? Fruits and vegetables. So yes, you could be doing all these fanjangled things. You could be taking these, expensive superfoods, but none of it is necessary. What we need to focus on is the stuff, 10% that makes 80% of the difference. And I'm telling you, that's eating enough vegetables. So what we're looking for is at least 5 serves of vegetables every day. Now, the beautiful thing about this is when you stop focusing on the foods you can't eat, and instead we start crowding in more vegetables, suddenly you feel like you're allowed to eat foods. Because when you're on a diet, it's like, well, what am I allowed to eat anymore? But when we crowd in more of the healthy foods, we don't feel deprived. We go to a restaurant, and instead of going, which has the fewest calories, which has the less sugar, we look at the menu and go, which has the most vegetables in it? And I tell you what, you are ultimately always going to pick the healthiest option if you're simply keeping vegetables in mind. How can I eat more vegetables? Different colors, all the colors of the rainbow. As the seasons change, we want to be changing the kinds of foods that we eat. A probiotic is really helpful. I think that's a great idea. You can get the best source of probiotic is going to be in plain Greek yogurt. So we'll talk about that in a little bit later, but that's a fantastic thing to do. But even more important than probiotics is sleep, making sure you're prioritizing getting enough sleep. And something really interesting is that there's some really great research that shows that eating 30 different plant-based foods in a week can actually give your gut bugs really great support so that they can boost your immunity. So if you think about it, the more diverse your gut bugs are, think of it like a rainforest, whatever issues or diseases come your way, you're probably going to have the gut bugs to help fend them off. But if you only eat the same foods every single week, which is what happens when you're on a diet or a meal plan, you only have a few gut bugs. What we want is diverse gut bugs. So ideally, when you're going to the shops each week, what new fruit and vegetable is in season at the moment? What could I try? How can I experiment with this? Become less obsessed with the foods you're not allowed to eat and more excited about the new ways that you can try new vegetables and fruit. So 2 fruit per day. This is a serve, so we want 2 of these a day. Any fruit, there are no fattening fruit. Every fruit is good for you. What we want to keep doing is mixing it up. And one of the things people often do is they eat sad fruit. You know the sad fruit I'm talking about, the fruit you don't really want to eat. You buy it with good intentions, but it's not very exciting, so it sits there and goes sad in your fridge. I want you to spend a little bit of extra money on cherries or blueberries or grapefruit or whatever it is that's going to actually excite you, and eat that. I want you to forget about how much sugar is in it, because ultimately fruit is fantastic for you. And anyone who tells you otherwise has no idea what they're talking about. And the same thing applies for vegetables. There are no good vegetables. There are no vegetables that are too starchy or have too much carbohydrates. All vegetables are good for you.
Do potatoes count as a vegetable?
If you have the skin on, then yes. And we're getting that variety in. They do contain nutrients. If it's in a French fry form, not as useful.
And I saw you did a video which is really good on, you're on Channel 9, and you're talking about sleep. And a lot of people, and I've also been suffering this, found it hard to fall asleep in these troubling times. So have you got any suggestions of how we can fall asleep, what we can eat or drink before bed to help that?
And interestingly, I think, if we think back to when you're a baby, babies do respond really well to having milk before bed, and it turns out that so do adults. And having a little bit of dairy foods before we go to sleep can actually give us the right mix of amino acids and nutrients that we need to help us build melatonin in our brain. We know melatonin is the chemical in our brain that puts us to sleep. So we need things that are high in tryptophan, but that's complicated. One of the things I think we often try and do is we either undereat, so we go to bed hungry, so that's never a good idea, or we overeat because we try to be good all day. We come home, we eat all this food, now we have a full stomach, now we feel guilty, now we've added to one more stressor in our lives. So by simplifying these things, I think we're going to be doing a whole lot better. There was a big phase as well of cutting out carbohydrates at nighttime. And I think this is really a problem because your body really does appreciate carbohydrates. You don't want to eat carbohydrates all day, every day, but every single meal can have a healthy serve of carbohydrates in them. And there's good research to say that carbohydrates help give your body the right energy to help you fall asleep and be calmer at nighttime. So just before you go to sleep, check that you're not hungry. Check that you ate enough during the day so that you can actually not go to bed with such a full stomach, and let yourselves have some foods that make you feel really good. So we're going to bed with less anxiety. I will say there are important things like not using your phone in bed, letting it charge in a different room, reducing your screen time, maybe reading a book before bed, having a warm bath or shower. There's a lot of really good protocols to do. But I will say that exercising, enjoyable exercise during the day, can often help you fall asleep at night. Now, if you're in Melbourne with lockdown, I know that's a little bit trickier at the moment, but there are things that you could do at home to move your body. And even just giving yourself a bit of a break. I think we're all so hard on ourselves and we expect so much. It can make it very hard to fall asleep.
Thank you. Okay, can we just talk about, we're going to take some questions in a minute, so please start typing your questions, because I'm sure Lyndi will be very happy to answer them. So please start thinking about what you want to ask. In the meantime, I want to ask you about bone health. Many of us are at an age where we need to, we should always think about it, but we really need to start thinking about it. What's your suggestion?
Yes. So 1/4 of Australians have osteoporosis, which is kind of outrageous if you think about we're this country that has all this sun, vitamin D from the sun that can really help our bone health. And we have such high rates of osteoporosis. So we know that we have to be getting a good amount of sun during the day in a healthy way. What this means is that we want to be avoiding those middle of the day peaks. But even if you're going to go sit outside in the garden in the morning and you're going to get a little bit of sun exposure, that is great to do. You can still wear SPF on your face. We want to get just a touch of exposure, but not too much. And supplementation is a really good idea, and it's something that you should have a chat to your doctor about, to check your levels and make sure that you are getting enough through your diet, well through the sun, because it's very hard to get vitamin D through your diet. It really is. You can get fortified foods, but it's tricky. A fun trick is that having mushrooms that have been sitting in the sun for even 1 hour will give you 100% of your vitamin D requirements for the day. So if you are going to eat mushrooms, they can synthesize vitamin D. And I just pop them out in the sun before I use them. You could store them in the fridge, use them whenever. They hold on to that vitamin D. But let's talk about calcium. So we have vitamin D and calcium. These are very important. When you have calcium, we know calcium, it's dairy foods particularly. So it's yogurts, our cheese, and our milk. When you're going to have dairy foods, we want to have about 3 serves a day. It's quite a lot. So once again, we're crowding in healthy foods instead of worrying about the foods we can't eat. Have to eat more dairy. How am I going to do that? We might go for a glass of milk as a snack or add it into after a meal. Or have a slice of cheese. Find ways to sneak it in. What is very important, particularly if you are a tea drinker or you are a coffee drinker or you drink alcohol, these foods, things like anything with caffeine, can actually reduce your absorption of calcium. So if you are going to have an afternoon snack and you're going to have a pot of yogurt and then you're going to have a tea or coffee nearby, you're actually going to mean that you don't absorb much of the calcium. So we want to create a bit of a gap between those foods. So just becoming mindful, that's a very simple thing to talk about. Just quickly, I'm just checking Kim Pry's question. Any mushrooms? Yes, Kim, any mushrooms are going to work for that. So especially all these common Australian mushrooms that we get. What about casein and dairy and all the research about how bad it is? There is research that some people react adversely to dairy foods, but not everyone. And in fact, majority of people don't. Calcium is definitely richer source in dairy foods. So if you cut it out, chances are you're going to need supplementation. Unless dairy makes you feel awful and causes a whole range of symptoms, and you will know about it, then you do not need to cut it out of your diet. But for some small people, they have either certain dairy intolerances or lactose intolerances, they do need to cut it out. But there's no reason why we need to just arbitrarily be cutting foods out of our diet because some newspaper article, even a research paper says it's potentially bad for us. If it feels good for your body, it's probably good for your body.
Question about full fat versus skim low fat milk. What's your take on it?
Yeah, so the research has come quite far on that. It used to be an obsession with low fat milk because dairy does have saturated fat in it. But interestingly, what they've found is that dairy is a bit different because the saturated fat in dairy doesn't adversely affect your heart like they previously thought it did. And they think there's something called the food matrix. So it's the whole mix of the nutrients and the way they interact in your body. My recommendation there is ideally I'd be going for dairy because it's got much higher calcium than any of these plant-based alternatives. And I'd be going for full fat, low fat, whichever kind of milk you enjoy that makes your body feel good, that's the best milk for you to be having. And I think I grew up on skim milk, so full cream makes me feel sick. So I go with light milk. So just find what works for you.
Okay, that's a good answer. Thank you. Okay, Mandy says, can 5 serves of vegetables be covered in a soup or must they be steamed or eaten raw?
They can be eaten any which way possible. However you can get them into your diet. They can be frozen, they can be canned, they could be mashed, they could be cooked for a while. What we don't want to be doing so much with food, with vegetables, is boiling them. I know there's like we used to eat boiled peas and we'd boil it and then we'd throw out all the water and a lot of the nutrients would leach out into the water. Anytime you are cooking foods, you are reducing or changing the nutrient profile, but it's this small. And then the value of eating that is this great. So let's not get dissuaded from cooking our vegetables because we might get a tiny micronutrient loss. In fact, sometimes steaming vegetables can help us get more nutrients out of it. So let's not forget an onion, throwing an onion into a soup, you've just added in 4 extra serves of vegetables. Chopping in extra carrots, a tin of tomatoes, that's 2 serves of vegetables. So anytime I'm cooking, I'm throwing in as much vegetables as possible. You can blend up those vitamin D mushrooms and they'll go into a bolognese. Even things like lentils, chickpeas, all these legumes, they are fantastic. And I would say they technically don't count towards vegetables, but if you can sneak them in, you'd be getting a whole lot of goodness in them.
Have you got a top three vegetable recommendation?
I love tomatoes, tins of tomatoes, because they could be added into everything. And snacking on cherry tomatoes is also very easy. I think people forget that pickles count as a serve of vegetables as well. But ideally, an avocado is a fruit. So a quarter of an avocado counts towards your fruit intake. There is no good vegetables. All vegetables are good. So provided that you're changing the kinds of vegetables you eat during the year, that's the best kind of vegetable for you.
Yeah, I like that idea. Let's talk breakfast for 1 minute before we have to take the last question and then go. I saw you made a beautiful muesli, and I'm actually going to put in the link to your muesli making on YouTube, which is beautiful. What's your number 1 breakfast? Is there a best breakfast?
I love to have, I love making my homemade muesli, and that's something I do quite consistently. It takes 5 minutes, but you feel very smug because it's very easy. The house smells amazing. Everyone seems very impressed by your cooking skills, and it's super healthy, but you barely did any effort at all. So what's beautiful about making your own muesli is that you can add in oats with all those whole grains. You get different seeds and nuts, and each time I make it, I'm using different seeds and nuts. Whichever dried fruit excites you for that week, you can get thrown in. And you can also adjust how much oil. I use extra virgin olive oil for my fat sauce, and I use honey or maple syrup for sweetener. And you can always adjust that depending on your taste preferences for that week. And it stores really well in an airtight container for a couple of weeks. I'll have that with the milk in the morning, and that keeps me really full. The worst breakfast is the breakfast that you think you should be eating, that doesn't keep you feeling full, that makes you feel like you're on a diet. And we need to actually give ourselves permission to eat enough foods during the day so that you are able to actually go to sleep easily at night because you ate most of your food during the day.
Very good advice. Thank you. I'm gonna go and make your muesli tomorrow. It sounds absolutely, it looks delicious. Watch the YouTube video. I've put the link on the chat, and you can all go and make it and see how well you can start your day off with that muesli. Any more questions before we finish? There must be someone out there. Someone says, love your nonna's minestrone. Is that your nonna?
That's, is that my, that is maybe my, I have a nonna's minestrone soup. Yeah, it's super easy. Says,
yeah, love your nonna's minestrone, quick, easy and delicious. Is that on your website?
Yeah, that is on my website. And also, I mean, that's what I specialize in. Like with Back to Basics, my app, every recipe is under 20 minutes using affordable, easy options that are freezer friendly. I've got like 400 recipes. And what's really cool about Back to Basics is you can click a button and it gets added to your Woolworths online cart. So if you are in isolation at the moment and you don't want to go to the shops, click a button and all the recipes can get added and you don't have to do the grocery shop.
And do they find that at your website, which is lyndycohen.com?
That's exactly it. Or you can search the Nude Nutritionist and you'll find me somewhere.
So everyone can find everything about Lyndi and her programs and everything and her videos and recipes on her website, which is really worth looking at. And please follow her on social if you are on social, because it's a very, very interesting feed. It really drew me in years ago and I've been a fan ever since. So there are no more questions. So I'm going to sign off now. And Lyndi, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure everybody has loved the discussion today. Really appreciate you giving up time. And perhaps after this is over, you and I can talk about you coming back to Dunera and doing something else for everybody, because I think they'd really love something from you.
Sounds lovely, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you everyone for listening.
And just a quick goodbye from me and a reminder to check out the Dunera website, dunera.org.au for the things coming up. We've got something next Monday, which is the winner chicken dinner, and then Lainey Kadri, followed by Alice Zaslavsky. So please check all those events and register, because we'd love you to join us. So bye for now. See you next time.
See everyone. Bye.
Bye.